everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to the Knights of Last Call. My name, of course, is Derek Melinda, and I am here to welcome you to another exciting live stream where we are going to be covering in-depth history and kind of modern day, by that I mean Pathfinder 2nd Edition, representation of a classic class. And for tonight, we are going to be discussing the Monk. We're going to kind of spend 30 to 45 minutes kind of talking about where the Monk came from the earliest roots of the game to present day 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, which is its most recent D20 version, bearing in mind some stuff that's probably come out after the OGL fiasco. I suppose at some point we'll have to go and take a look at some of the stuff coming out of Cobalt Press and stuff like that. Yeah, there is no books on the shelves. Yeah, so what I am doing, actually, do I have it? Hold on. So I bought these aluminum channels with diffusion on it, this sort of white plastic diffusion cover, and I'm soldering in some LED strips, and I'm actually going to drill holes through my collection, and I'm going to have it be lit, sort of backlit. That way, looks cool, I guess. So real quick shout out. We got Dirk Guyver in the house, a supporter of the YouTube channel, as you can see by that sexy blue badge. Dirk Guyver, of course, is also the same Dirt who has recently had his first appearance on the episode on the KLC show on Tuesday when he came and learned how to play Root with all of you. So Dirt is going to be joining us for the Root campaign, and he is a good friend of mine, and I'm really happy to see him. Also want to give a shout out to C. Cav, another member of the adventure, saying howdy, monks, if only you were a fighter. Real small side note, which you may not notice, I left the HDMI cable that connects my teleprompter to my computer up at the studio, so I don't have my teleprompter tonight. So I might be having to look off to the side when I read your chat. So if it looks a little bit stranger, that's why that is going on. Jackal-Torn Moons, what is up, Derek? What is up, Knights? Glad to see you, Jackal-Torn Moons.
Anonymous tipped $3. Hey. I was lucky enough to find a non-PFS game that works for me, a playtest for Northern Reaches, where I was gonna play a Tree Hugger Nico terrorist-themed Pine Leshy Alchemist. But then I'm not in it anymore. Plaza Derek, what happened?
I don't know if you intended to be anonymous, but it was a good troll anyways. Listen, you got to if you keep bothering me about that, I'm going to ban you. Okay. If you just keep bringing that up, I'm going to have to ban you. No, thank you so much for that tip. Oh, it was you. Okay. It was you, Jackal-Torn Moons. Okay. Good stuff. Yeah. Chanka says, God, that was so cringe on the RFC stream. Yes, it was very cringe. In case if you missed it, Janka, we do have something on the Discord, which is hashtag a channel RPG cringe, and I definitely posted while we were live. I was posting that stuff into the RPG cringe channel because that was real cringe. Yes, Brass Dragon infiltrating the chat. He's back. I mean, look, I'm sure they're a fine person. Just there's better ways to get people, to answer you than just spamming somebody during. I mean, it's kind of like, well, you're giving them a lot of money, so I guess that makes it okay. But anyways, Bob, who is late, but also obviously a member of the Knights of Last Call. Bob, I was just describing how I am going to be mounting these aluminum C channels with this sort of plastic diffusion cover, and I'm going to solder up some LED strips, and I'm going to drill holes through the sides of the bookshelf, and I'm going to sort of take it in and sort of light up my collection. Heyo, Damian Williams, member of the adventure, member of the Patreon, and dropping a super chat. So glad to see our friend Pawn no longer here. History of monks. They were broken. Then they sucked for 4 generations. Then Pathfinder 2nd Edition made them not suck. Good night, everybody. That is an accurate take on the monks. That is pretty actually very true. So I don't need to talk about them anymore. That was pretty good. What else do we got here? Frostjack is here, moving house today. We'll try to catch some of this. And Bam Curtain Bear says hello too. Well, hello, Bam Curtain Bear. Hopefully moving houses is a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing, but hopefully it's a good thing. KC is here. What's up, KC? Ken also noting that I have no books on my shelves. Again, I think it's gonna look sweet. We're gonna try to up it up. You know, increase the. We got the studio pretty much on lockdown, so now I gotta spend some TLC here at home. Serious Whimsy is watching the stream on television with their partner Bev, who has never watched KOLC content before. Well, welcome Serious Whimsy. Welcome Bev. Glad to have you here, and hope you enjoy tonight's kind of look back on the history of the monk, starting back in 1974, all the way up through modern day, where we'll talk, kind of get into some of the nitty gritty about the Pathfinder 2nd Edition's version of the monk. Melissa, hello. Henry, another member of the adventure, says, good evening, KOLC. Good evening to you as well, Henry. Love to see all these members of the adventure here as well. Janka says, it is time to achieve the monkey, the gorilla, the orangutan, the small, tiny monkey. I was thinking about doing some sort of monkey joke for the stream thumbnail, but I couldn't come up with anything really good enough, so I just went with it's stunning. Where is my pickle avatar update? That's true. Lord Villic, played by Bob's brother, Danny, who you may remember from very early episodes of Knights of the Last Call, Rise of Rune Lords, was a monk as well. So from sort of the beginning and the get-go. And we'll get into what I think about the Pathfinder 2nd Edition monk. I do want to real quick, before we get into sort of the history, couple housekeeping items to point out. So number one, tomorrow, June 30th, 2023, is the 2-year anniversary of the Knights of Last Call Patreon. So the Patreon went live June 30th, 2021. And as we sort of move forward here throughout the rest of this year, every time somebody comes up with a really big anniversary, I really want to give them a shout out. And in particular, we have some people who have been with us the entire time for 2 years. And since the very first day we went live. And of course, these two individuals, and again, as we get to other people's anniversaries, I'm going to make sure that I spend a few minutes just to call them out. So first is our buddy Ross, who is a fantastic friend of mine. All the Knights really know and love him. I've been playing RPGs with him for a long time. And Ross started off as a hero and has maintained his heroship this entire time. So Ross, thank you so much for your continual support all these years. It's amazing. Our second supporter is Tim. Yes, Tim of Gwildor fame, and of course of Breck, aka the wielder of Hatchethoff. Long before he joined us as a member of the cast and crew, Tim was a supporter. So Tim joined us on day one as well. So our first two patrons were two of our friends, but it did not take long until, all of you started finding us, and I'm going to be really happy to celebrate some of these big milestones as we continue to go on throughout the summer and into the fall. Secondly, we have 2 tip goals tonight, one for Super Chats, one for the Stream Elements tips, which you can find a link to in the description below, or you can type !tip, and that'll bring up a link. If we reach those goals, then at the end of the stream, we're going to put a poll up and let the chat vote on what topic they would like to see next for Night School, or what class we would like to handle next for our Pathfinder 2nd Edition series. If we get both, we'll do both. But here's the catch. We'll probably put 5 or 6 items in there, but whichever are the top 2, whoever is the hype boss at the time of the poll, they are going to get to pick between number 1 and number 2. So, you might want to be a little strategic and time your tipping. But if you come in and you are the hype boss at the end of the stream when we do the poll, we're going to get the poll up anyways, and we'll definitely vote as a chat group. But the hype boss will get to pick either number 1 or number 2 between the 2. So kind of a fun thing. We don't use the hype boss a lot, so I just decided to throw that in there as well. And we were looking today at the night school, and we were Ben and I were going over the music and the intro, and I was like, man, I miss night school. So I think it'd be fun to bring that back. All right. I think we're good. All right. right, you guys ready? Let's get into this. All right. The history of the monk goes back nearly to the beginning of the game. As, of course, we've seen before on this series, a lot of these classes really go all the way back to the very beginning of the game. And this is not first edition AD&D. This is original Dungeons and Dragons, sometimes called OD&D for original Dungeons and Dragons, or 0th edition. And originally, Dungeons and Dragons was produced with 3 little brown books, Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure, and I can't remember the name of the third one, but they came in a little box set. But very quickly, Tactical Studies, TSR, Tactical Study Rules, came out with a series of supplements for their new game. And these supplements added some of the elements that we have come to know and love. But supplement number 2, which came out the very next year after Dungeons and Dragons release, was special for a couple of reasons. Number 1, Blackmore was authored by Dave Arneson, who is the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. And we've talked about this before, but Dave Arneson's, what he added to Dungeons and Dragons was really the idea of the dungeon. While Gary had created this idea of playing a single character on the field of battle, sort of representing you as a hero or a superhero on the field of this fantastic battle, it was Dave Arneson who took the idea of what if we took these individually powerful characters, took them off of the battlefield and had them explore, in this case, the dungeons of Castle Blackmore, which became Dungeons and Dragons. So Dave Arneson sort of added this element of exploration. Now, of course, we've moved away from that as time has gone on, but at the time, that was as essential to the game as anything. But in the original release, of course, there was not even the thief class yet. The original release only had the magic user, the cleric, and the fighting man. Now, in supplement number 1, Eldritch Wizardry, we got the thief. But in supplement number 2, we would get 2 new classes. The first class that we would gain is a subclass of the newly introduced thief, which is the assassin. But we're not going to talk about the assassin today. But what we are going to talk about is the monk, which an order of monastic martial arts, which was a subclass of the cleric. And generally speaking, in the beginning of the game, was considered to basically be a mix between thief and fighting man. Now remember, back in the original version of the thief had access to about 6 or 7 specialty thief skills, which worked on a percentage system, aka as you got higher level, there was a higher percentage chance that you could move silently, hide in shadows, climb walls, that sort of thiefy rogue stuff. So the idea of the monk was to combine a fighter with a thief and kind of end up with this sort of, and have a unique twist of martial arts. I also think it's really interesting because, for the fact of the matter is that for the vast majority of D&D has been and kind of continues to be fairly Euro-centric. And the monk, in fact, there's some funny anecdotes about this because of confusion. The monk has always had a very Asian-inspired influence, particularly East Asia, and some of the, famous martial arts inclined to, monks out of China and Tibet and Japan and etc. And people didn't really quite understand that. And so if you go back to the 1970s, when they were making monk miniatures, some of the very first early leaded miniatures, the manufacturers, quality control wasn't quite what it was today. The manufacturers were actually printing Franciscan monks, Gregorian monks, European monks, like Friar Tuck, but doing like crazy martial arts moves and, with the throwing a fist, because they didn't understand what that meant. We take for granted. We just think, oh, monk, we think, Shaolin monk or something, but they thought it meant like Gregorian monk or Franciscan monk. So it was really, really funny how people had never really seen anything like this. And, the monk has always sort of had this unique trait of being this, Asian influence class, the fantasy Asia, let's be clear here, out in a very Euro-centric game. So there's always been sort of a touch exoticism, good and bad, with the monk. But yeah, so 1974, Blackmore supplement, and we get the monk. Now, like so many classes in first edition, which we'll see, and in original D&D, the monk, these specialty subclasses were extremely powerful. George says they didn't watch Kung Fu the series. I'm not unconvinced, George, that they did, and that is exactly where that came from, because I got to imagine that somebody was reading that and was like, oh, you know what, that would be cool to put into our game. Exactly. Orientalism. And as someone who plays Legend of the Five Rings, and is really interested in that whole culture as expressed through a game and a medium of a game, I understand the pitfalls of sort of appropriating a culture, but I also believe that there is some good that comes out of it, which is that you expose a culture to people who might not otherwise be exposed to it. And so, I think there's definitely, pitfalls along the way, but I think you can do it in a respectful way. And when they came out with it in original D&D, the monk was kind of a badass. And like so many other classes, the monk was balanced by needing absurd ability scores. So to be a monk, you were a suborder of a cleric, subclass of cleric. You needed at least a 15 wisdom score. You needed at least a strength score of 12, and you needed a dexterity score of 15. Now keep in mind, these were the days where you're rolling 3d6 straight. So the average roll on a 3d6 is 10.5, and you're rolling them in straight order. Only humans could become monk. They seek physical and mental superiority. They could be of any alignment, although they are usually lawful. I thought this was particularly interesting because I had misremembered or forgot this. Obviously, we associate during the 3rd edition era with monks having to be lawful, but actually they could originally be any alignment. They just tended towards law. Monks must treat treasure as do paladins. So what does that mean? It means they cannot keep superior wealth. They have to tithe away. They have to give away pretty much all of their wealth. They can only keep a limited number of magical items, which, remember, in original D&D and in 1st edition D&D, you didn't get all these cool feats. You didn't get all these cool abilities out of your character class. Magic items were kind of what made your character cool, right? You were Batman. You were not Superman. But monks and paladins got a big whole, this was their version of game balance, right? Monks and paladins got this whole grab bag of cool special abilities. And so they kind of balanced that by saying, yeah, they have this, their religious aesthetics. And so they live this very, minimalist lifestyle, or this very pious lifestyle. And so they cannot keep all of this amazing treasure and gold. And so that made it difficult for you to acquire all these magical items. So yes, the paladin or the monk in this case got all these really cool special abilities, but they couldn't keep all this cool treasure. They could not keep, they can't wear any armor, but, and by the way, there's no, there's nothing in here, by the way, though, about like them getting some sort of cool bonus to their AC because they're a monk. No, they just couldn't wear armor at all. So that was a little bit dicey. But they may use any weapons of any sort, and when they do use weapons, they get bonus damage. So for every 2 levels that they gained, they did more damage with their weapons. So they were martial arts masters. But as we would expect, when fighting without weapons, this rule, by the way, is so ridiculous. Okay, it's by the way, a couple things. It's kind of like an early version of Pathfinder 2nd edition's plus 10 minus 10 rule. When fighting without any weapons, monk gain 2 great bonuses. Not 2 bonuses, 2 great bonuses. They call it out. Any score, 25%. 5 or better above the minimum required for hit. So this is our way of saying if you get 5 or more, above what you needed to hit. So if you needed to roll an 11 to hit and you rolled a 16 or higher, that hit had a 75% chance of stunning the opponent for 3 to 12 turns and a 25% chance of just killing the opponent. Oh, we got a tip or a super chat from Dirt Guyver himself with a nice little sticker there who says, thanks for being you. And appreciate the sticker. Thank you, buddy. Looks kind of cutesy. I don't know why. Why can't we have cool stickers? But thank you for the super thanks. Thank you for the super sticker. So yeah, so we had this, I said the monks are stunning. So we started off with some pretty compelling rules here. If you hit 5 or more above what you needed to hit, they were either 75% chance they were stunned or 25% chance that you killed them. Okay, that's pretty good. Damage done otherwise by your unarmed attacks is determined by a special table, aka they could do higher damage with their unarmed attacks. And monks of higher level may make multiple attacks during a melee round. So that's kind of a big deal when not many people could attack multiple times. So, we would see this idea that the monks had this ability to stun and kill with their fists, that they could attack for more damage with their offhand weapon or with their unarmed strikes, that they could attack a bunch very quickly. So this all was kind of being, baked into the monk. But I also mentioned that in this version, monks were treated as sort of a mix between fighting man, and thief. And so they get a lot of the thief abilities. And remember, this isn't a time where there were no skill system. So normally these would only have been possessed by a class like the thief. Instead, monks, they could avoid surprise, kind of like a barbarian or a thief. They gained the ability to open locks. They could remove traps. They had the listening ability of thieves, climbing walls ability of thieves. They also gained the cool special bonus, which we see kind of come up again and again, which is that monks, as long as they are able to kind of be near a surface, can essentially fall for greater distances and take no damage. They could hide and move silently. So, they basically were really cool fighters and pretty proficient and good thieves. At 4th level, they gained the ability to speak with animals. At 8th level, they could speak with plants. Again, gaining these kind of, fantastic, versions of what people expected these, East Asian monks to be able to do, such as, being able to feign death. You can't read their minds with ESP. This is an ability that we still see in Pathfinder 2 today. The ability to heal themselves, an ability that we typically call wholeness of body nowadays. But they had that ability right from the beginning of 1974. Mental effects became weak against them. And of course, the dreaded quivering palm. Something that is no longer, alas, really kind of part of the game. But at the time, this was an instant death ability. And it was given to martial monk characters, and it was really, really powerful, and it was really, really broken. A couple of interesting things, though. Remember, we mentioned before about how their armor class wasn't that great, but guess what? They got to make saving throws against missile hits and magic missile hits to dodge them. So they could actually dodge ranged attacks and magical ranged attacks. And this is also really interesting. As far as I know, this is the first instance of what we would call in 3rd edition evasion. And it's still called evasion in Pathfinder 2nd edition now, which is the idea that if you make your saving throw against something like a fireball or a lightning bolt, you typically take half damage. But if you have this special evasion power, you take none. And this kind of went away in, as far as I know, like especially by, 1st edition, 2nd edition, and it didn't get brought back until 3rd edition. And now in Pathfinder 2nd edition, we have it for fortitude in the form of Juggernaut and will in the form of Iron Will. But the monks got this all the way back in 1974. This kind of, is what originally sort of opened the mold. So yeah, again, monks, cannot use potions or scrolls. They can only use rings. Again, very limited in their magical items. So yeah, monks pretty cool, and a lot of the groundwork was laid as we would see it. All right, so that brings us to 1st edition, our good old friend, the 1st edition AD&D Player's Handbook. Of course, by this point in time, it's now 1979, roughly. 1978. 1978. And Gary Gygax has he's decided that the game has become too wild and chaotic and is no longer appropriate for tournament play. An advanced version, an official advanced version of Dungeons and Dragons must be created so that we can have proper standards in play. So Gary goes and creates advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and into his new game, he adds the Monk. Now, a couple of things become immediately apparent. We can see that the Monk is now on their own. They are their own class. They are no longer a subclass of the Cleric. So that's one thing that's kind of interesting, kind of pulling them away from that. And then we get access to our Monk. Okay. The Monk is the most unusual amongst characters, the hardest to qualify for, and perhaps the most deadly. That is why this class is given out of alphabetical order at the end of the section. So in first edition, the Monk was so powerful, they literally pulled it out of alphabetical order. Okay? Insane, right? Again, the ability scores that we needed, there are even more of them now, because now you need a strength of 15, a wisdom of 15, a dex of 15, and a con of 11. Right? Now, monks have to be lawful. So now we see that when it went from sometimes lawful to always lawful. And I love this. A brief study will reveal that the monk appears quite weak, even considering that at the topmost level, a monk can have 18 four-sided hit dice. That's right. The monk used D4s for their hit points. Not D6s, not D8s, not D10s, D4s. Now, there was a little bit of a quirk, which is that they started off with 2, which is kind of unusual. But other than that, they only got, each time they gained a level, they only gained a D4 worth of hit points. The only other class that is really like that is, yes, GM Scott, is the Ranger. The Ranger was the other class that got that. But, the Ranger gets D8. You're like, okay, well, that feels kind of closer to it. But the Monk is a D4. So Casey says, was AD&D 3d6 flat roll for stats, in which case that's a tough number to hit. This is actually a common misconception, Casey, and I'm not going to pull open the DMG, but Gary basically said, somewhat dismissively, a lot of people think 3d6 straight for stats. And then while that is true for original Dungeons and Dragons, and it was true for basic Dungeons and Dragons, Gary basically said, those games are for kids. And, the characters for my advanced Dungeons & Dragons game need to be stronger. And so while a lot of people made the mistake of rolling 3d6 straight in first edition, Gary himself offered, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 different alternatives for creating ability scores. Now, it was still random and oftentimes in order. It was not nearly as lenient as we would get to in, let's say, third edition, where you would roll 4d6, take the 3 highest, you would do that 6 times, and then you could put your stats wherever you want. That being said, there were methods in place in order to give yourself better stats. But I would argue, I played a lot of third edition, and someone getting 3 15s along with an 11, and that's assuming you could put the stats anywhere you wanted, was still a pretty, tough row to hoe. So didn't really come up that much. So yeah, monks have no spell ability, cannot wear armor, use a shield. Not even flaming oil is available to them. Oh my God, the monk can't even use flaming oil. What are we even doing here? This seems to make this a weak class indeed. I love that he's having this conversation with you. But this impression is false. For monks have powerful special attacks and defensive capabilities. So let's get into it. So again, the monk attacks as a thief. However, they add 1 point of damage every 2 levels that they've gained to their attack, representing their study and knowledge of weapons and anatomy. Monks of higher level actually fight better without weapons, using their open hands. Open hand damage is shown on the monk's table 2 below. In addition, monks have a chance to stun or even kill an opponent. That's right, they kept this, even into first edition D&D. If the monk scores 5 or better to hit, then it would indicate a stun. Now, they made a little bit more little bit more balanced here. But the fact of the matter is, it was a percentage chance, but there was no stunning fists per day. It was just every time you hit by 5 or more, there was a chance to stun. Additionally, there was a several percent chance of killing. So just their normal attacks would stun and kill people. They could also attack multiple times. They still make their saving throws abilities. They still get their evasion abilities in order to knock aside potential attacks. I mean, they got to make, saving throws against stuff that people didn't even get to make saving throws amongst. Again, hard to surprise. They gained open locks, find, remove traps, move silently, hide in shadows, hear noises. They could fall a large amount of distance. You could see that by the end of the game, and this is back in the day when, people were just, a +5 sword did D8 +5 damage, which is insane. But, at the end of the game, a monk was doing 8 to 32 damage. Let's see our statistics, people. What dice do you need to roll to get 8 to 32? They don't tell you in these games. In first edition AD&D, they don't actually tell you, but it's pretty easy, obviously, to solve. But I'll tell you this, when I was a kid, I didn't know that shit. Yes, Jim Scott, correct, 8d4. To be somewhat confusing, because the prior level was 5 to 30, which would be 5d6. So you go from 5d6 damage per attack up to 8 to 32, which is 8d4 per attack. By the way, there was no such thing as multiple attack penalty or base attack penalty. You just got 4 attacks at this level. So a high-level monk was making 4 attacks, doing 30, possibly up to 30 damage just with the dice alone. By the way, this is a game where you stopped gaining hit points at 9th level. So very famously, Loth, the demon queen of spiders, in the monster manual had 66 hit points. So a monk potentially could kill Loth in like 2 hits, 3 hits maybe. Also, you can see that their armor class starts off at a horrible 10, but literally gets 1 better each level. Their movement also doubles over the course of the game, and they gain a variety of special abilities, A to K, such as speaking with animals, masking their mind from ESP. They are not subject to diseases. They cannot be slowed or hasted. They can feign death. They can heal themselves with their ki. They can speak with plants. Mental effects such as charm and suggestion have a flat chance of failing against them. Telepathic and mind blast abilities do not affect them. They cannot be affected by poisons of any kind. They cannot be affected by Geas spells or quest spells. And of course, as before, the last ability and the most terrible power is the fabled attack, which allows the monk to set up vibrations in the body of the victim. The monk can then control such vibrations so as to cause death to occur when the monk stops them, known as the quivering palm. And boom. You just 5-point heart exploding technique. And it is insane. Now, of course, monks have to abide by a number of restrictions. No armor, only usable by monk weapons. Treasure, much like a paladin, they can only retain a small fraction of whatever treasure they get. They can possess no more than 2 magical weapons and 3 other magical items. Everything else must be tithed away. So they don't gain until you reach the rank of master. You may not have hirelings or henchmen of any kind. And in first edition, that was a big thing. Meaning you couldn't have your little loyal band of red shirts to follow you around. So yeah, also like the druid, there can only be a limited number of monks above 7th level, the superior master. There are only 3 8th level monks, master of dragons, but 1 of each higher level. When a player character monks gain sufficient experience points to qualify for 8th level, the consummate abilities you gain are only gained temporarily. The monk must find and defeat in single hand-to-hand combat, without weapons, without magic items, 1 of the 8th level monks. The white monk, the green monk, or the red. And you must do the same at 9th or higher level. Otherwise, you go back down and you do not level up. Ford asks, why can they speak to plants feel so random? I think it just comes from some of the, the idea that the characters are so in touch with nature that they have the ability to, speak with plants, speak with animals. They are in touch with the natural world, right? They don't age. The monks have sort of gained a sort of Buddha-like enlightenment that sort of allows them to sort of transcend humanity. And yeah. Also, they had the coolest level title names, right? I mean, Master of the North Wind. Now, remember, like I said, there are 3 superior masters. But then after this, there's only 1 Master of Dragons. There's only 1 9th level monk in the whole world. There's only 1 Master of the North Wind, West Wind, South Wind, East Wind, 1 Master of Winter, 1 Master of Autumn, 1 Master of Summer, 1 Master of Spring. And at level 18, you are the Grand Master of Flowers. So that's pretty cool. Not going to lie. Yeah, Jackal Tormoon says this is pretty cool. So yeah, again, we had this really interesting thing about the monk. Now, 2nd edition got rid of the monk. It's hard to say why, but I think the answer is if you look at the 1st edition classes that they got rid of, the monk, the barbarian, these were the really powerful and broken characters. I think in 2nd edition, they were trying to somewhat rein in the power level of the characters. And so the monk did not appear in the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. There was no monk. So for the better part of 11 years, 2nd edition Player's Handbook came out in 1989. There was no monk. There was no barbarian. The only thing that we got in 2nd edition was Player's Handbook Reference 3, okay, the rule supplement. This was the complete Priest's Handbook. So these were basically a series. These were called the red books, or the red cover books. These were sort of like the splat books of 2nd edition. This was the 3rd one which came out, which covered priests. And this included a pseudo version of the monk. Let me find it. Let's see. There we go. The Fighting Monk. So while it was not a part of the actual game, it did eventually get included as sort of a weird kit. But what's interesting to note about this monk is that this monk was very much like a cleric. These monks got divine spells. These monks cast cleric spells. So this monk was really more of kind of a European monk, which it still had some of the restrictions and some of the things, but I should note that this monk had no quivering palm. This monk had no stunning fists, okay? This monk was basically just like a unarmed fighting cleric. So really not the monk that we had kind of come to know and love. So for all intents and purposes, the monk disappeared for the better part of a decade. It just went away. This monk was gone completely until we arrive at 3rd edition D&D, which of course would inspire 3.5, this is 3.5, which then would have further inspire Pathfinder 1. And lo and behold, as everyone knows, in 3rd edition, they brought back the barbarian and they brought back the monk. Now, even from an early edition, I always wanted the monk in 3rd edition to be better than it was. The monk was a cool class now, but and you look at what the monk gained in 3rd edition, and it's pretty cool. For starters, they got really good saves in all 3 categories. They got fort, ref, and will, but they were a hand-to-hand combat class. Unfortunately, that brief time, that stigma of being in 2nd edition, where they kind of got associated with being a cleric, as opposed to being a legitimate fighting man, cool, awesome killer, stuck them, or rather saddled them with the priest's base attack bonus, not the warriors. So whereas a warrior type class, barbarian, ranger, fighter, gained 1 point of attack bonus every level, all the way up to 20, the monk only got up to 15, which means the monk's accuracy was always less than that of their companions. Now, the monk could, from the very beginning of the game, make a variety more attack rolls than anyone else. Everybody else couldn't get 2 attacks until they were level 6, but the monk could make 2 attacks right away at level 1, but at a penalty to attack, and they were already lower to attack than everybody else. In addition, the monk had what we call back in this day multiple attribute dependency, also known as MAD. And in fact, the monk was probably the maddest class of all of them, because in 3rd edition, they got rid of needing insane stats. In fact, you don't need stats to qualify for a class. In other words, you don't need a 15 strength or a 15 dex or a 15, right? You can just play whatever you want. But here's the problem. To be an effective monk, you kind of still did. You see, in retrospect, looking back at 3rd edition, there was a lot of things where it's like they felt like they were giving you an option, but they really weren't giving you an option. Let me give you an example. In 1st edition D&D and in 2nd edition AD&D, wizards could not cast spells in armor whatsoever. It just, if you had armor on, you could not cast spells. So 3rd edition said, we're getting rid of that stuff because that's silly. It doesn't make sense. Wizards can cast spells in armor, but you're not proficient in the armor. And if you're wearing the armor, you have this massive percentage chance to fail your spells. And so the end result was wizards didn't wear armor. And they may as well not have had it. And it felt like they were giving you something, but they really weren't giving you something. So while the monk theoretically could now be played by somebody who had pretty mediocre stats, the fact is the monk really needed a good strength, a good wisdom, a pretty good con, and a good dexterity. The only 2 stats that a monk could really afford to lose out on were intelligence and charisma. And because you needed wisdom to power your spells and abilities, as well as your monk bonus armor class, you needed dexterity to make up for your low AC, and you needed strength if you wanted to have any chance of hitting and doing damage. So, and of course, you're a fighting class, but you only had D8 hit points. So you needed constitution in order to keep your hit points up. And so the end result was you had a lot of people play monks in Pathfinder 1 and in 3rd edition that were quite frankly not very good. If your character rolled insane stats, I'm sure you could have a very, very, very powerful monk character, no doubt. But by and large, they sort of failed to, convert and deliver. But some of those concepts that we've seen in previous editions are still here. We can see that the unarmed damage of the monk continues to scale up from D6 all the way up to 2D10 at the very end of the game. Not quite the 8 to 32 that we used to have. And while every other class caps out at 4 or 3 maximum attacks, a monk with flurry of blows can actually get 5. Of course, you are very unlikely to ever hit with any of these last couple of attacks. But as you got to very high levels, the ability to make 3 attacks at your highest base attack bonus was pretty good. Granted, it was a full attack action, which meant, you couldn't move before you did that. So, that was the trade-off with 3rd edition. But we can see the monk is just pack full of goodies in 3rd edition. And I think this is what made the monk so interesting. I mean, look at a class like, the cleric. Here's our barbarian. Sorry, not our barbarian. Here's our bard. You get your spells and you get a couple of abilities, and some of this stuff is just upgraded. Inspire Courage goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, which is cool, but it's not amazing. And then if we look at the cleric doesn't get anything for the entire game. They get spells and they start the game with the ability to turn undead. So the monk just ends up with this grab bag of cool abilities. I mean, the druid, sure, but these are all basically more wild shapes and wild shaping into different forms, although the druid was still pretty cool, admittedly. So what did the monk get? Yeah, the monk got all of the cool abilities that we had talked about before. They gained that evasion ability to take no damage on a successful reflex save. Still mind, okay, no longer were they immune. We're starting to get to the world where immunity was not something that you could really do, but they were bonus to save against mental effects. They could fall slowly when they were near, walls. They could wholeness of body to heal themselves. They could empower their hands and fists to become magical, lawful weapons. They gained magic resistance, the ability to dimension door, which was brand new to 3rd edition. Eventually, they became immune to aging with the timeless body. They still gained at 17th level the tongue of the sun and the moon, which allowed them to speak with any intelligent creature. I don't know if it was plants. Any living creature, which would be a plant. So a monk could still, in 3rd edition, talk to any living creature. They could become ethereal, and then at level 20, you were so awesome that you were considered an outsider. Although in many cases, this was actually a drawback and not actually that much of a benefit. So the monk came back, and on the surface, seemed like it was very, very powerful and seemed like it was very, very cool. But all the monk really ever ended up having was really good saving throws. They really did not do enough damage, and some of their DCs were pretty low, that it made it hard for you to be able to attack. And of course, stunning fists, right? Used to be if you hit by 5 or more, the creature got stunned. Well, that went away in 3rd edition, and stunning fist instead became a feat, and you could only use it a couple of times a day. And you had to declare a stunning fist before you attacked. And if you missed with that attack, that stunning fist was wasted and missed. So it was really, really a big power decrease from what we had seen previously back in the days of 1st edition. But of course, anyone could be a monk now. Before, you needed these insane ability scores to even qualify for it. And that was part of the balance of 1st edition D&D was, using these high ability scores in order to qualify you. Denny the Many says, listening from the gym today, got a weak strength stat. Well, you got to get it up. If you want to be a monk, you got to qualify. You need a 15 strength. And everybody could use a mithril buckler. Yes, that is true. The mithril buckler had no armor check penalty. And so it gave you the penalty, but the penalty was 0. And the arcane spell failure, I think, was baseline 10%. And I think mithril took 10% off. So that is correct, George. Interestingly, the monk some people don't realize that it was in 4th edition D&D because the monk did not appear in the player's handbook. It did not appear in the following year's player's handbook 2. It would take until player's handbook 3 years into the 4E life cycle before the monk would come to 4th edition. And by this time, a lot of people had moved on from 4th edition. Pathfinder 1 had come out, so a lot of people had made the switch over to Pathfinder 1. And I think in general, the game was struggling. And so a lot of people never even really realized that the monk got released in the game. What was interesting in 4th edition is the classes, right, had to fill a role. Defender, kind of your tank, heavy defense, protect your allies, defender role. The controller, sort of your AoE blaster, enemy debuffer. The leader, which was like your healer or your buffer. And then there was striker, which had the ability to do damage. And then on top of that, you had the power source. What kind of striker were you? What kind of defender were you? Were you martial? You relied on training and skill. Were you divine, relying on the power of the gods, primal, nature? And in Player's Handbook 3, they introduced the psionic power source. And they gave us 4 new classes, 6, but I'm going to ignore 2 of these because they're not psionic. The psionic power classes that they gave us, or the psionic classes that they gave us, were the Ardent, the Battle Mind, the Monk, and the Scion. Now, the Scion was the controller. The Battle Mind was the defender. The Ardent was the leader. And the Monk was the striker. So they turned the Monk into a psionic striker. And I don't know that this class was really that great, but I felt like it made the Monk feel like more of part of the game by making it psionic. I don't really like psionics, but the idea of the power of the mind being sort of tied to the idea of being a monk, I thought was at least somewhat interesting. And this is 4th edition, so things are pretty pretty off balance, pretty different than what you might normally expect to see. But like one of the main things that a monk got was that you had these various Your Flurry of Blows was now an at-will ability, so you could just use your Flurry of Blows to usually attack several creatures. In fact, by the time you got to the epic levels, remember, these are your at-will abilities, the things that you can do all the time. When you're at the highest levels of the game, remember, 4th edition goes to 30th, you can attack every enemy adjacent to you. So, pretty sweet. And the way this actually works is pretty cool. It's a free action that triggers when you hit with an attack during your turn. So what this allowed a monk to do is they could use one of their more powerful attacks. You know, they could use the Rising Storm attack, or they could use the Open the Gates of Battle maneuver. And if you hit with that maneuver, you could trigger one of your Flurry of Blows abilities to do additional attacks or do additional damage. In fact, if you look at these Flurry of Blows cantrips, at will powers, if you will, don't actually require an attack roll. It just does extra damage and creates an extra effect. Like if you use the centered Flurry of Blows and hit an opponent, then the target takes damage equal to 2 plus your wisdom modifier, and you can slide it 1 square adjacent to you or 1 square in any direction. So like you can kind of move and push and, you know, shift people around, and it's just for free. So the monk kind of had this damage platform of being able to like hit, trigger another free hit, maybe trigger a different free hit. And so they could kind of stack up this kind of free hits to make a bunch of attacks. And they were very mobile. A lot of their powers gave them the ability to move around and shift around. So the monk in 4th edition was definitely, it existed, but like most things in 4th edition, it was pretty different from what we had come to expect and see. That being said, as we went into 5th edition, we would see kind of one element of the 4th edition monk become a reality. Now, I understand that there have been 3 or 4 subclasses which have come out in Unearthed Arcana articles or whatever since this has been published. But in the Player's Handbook, the monk had 3 subclasses. And again, we see here the monk kind of similar to what we've seen before. They get fast movement. Their martial arts ability starts off at really low damage and builds up to D10. So it's like each edition, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We can see that they can deflect missiles. They can fall slowly. They can do their stunning strikes. Some of these abilities are even named the same thing: stillness of mind, purity of body, tongue of the sun and moon, diamond soul, timeless body. I mean, the 5th edition monk, in my opinion, is very much kind of a variation or version of the 3rd edition monk. The only difference is that you get these key points, and now you get a certain number of them based off of your level, and you can use your key points in order to power additional abilities. So if you want a flurry, you can spend a key point to make 2 unarmed attacks as a bonus action. So right from, well, nearly the beginning of the game, you can, you know, a couple times, I think you get key points back on a long rest. No, short rest. Okay, that's not bad. Yeah. So, you know, it's a pretty cool resource. You can kind of get it back pretty cool. You could dodge as a bonus action, which is everybody gets disadvantage to attack you. And then you could also spend a key point to disengage or dash. Now, to be clear, like rogues can do this for free every turn with cunning action. So that's pretty, you know, it seems cool, but then you realize the rogue just gets that for free and can do that every well. But the problem ultimately is that the monk doesn't really gain any additional abilities. And it's my understanding that the monk really falls short. Additionally, the one thing that they took from 4th edition was these subclasses, and they tried to create sort of an avatar bender monk, right, who could cast these elemental spells and use them to sort of basically be like a, you know, an earthbender, an airbender. And my understanding is that it really falls short, and it's actually quite weak. And it looks like in chat here that people are agreeing with that. 5e monk is generally regarded as the weakest of the 5e classes. The 5e monk was largely received as underwhelming. No one short rests, which is so interesting to me. I find the short rest mechanic very interesting and cool. Alas. Everything that I think is okay about 5th edition is something that the wider 5th edition community either doesn't use or like thinks is bad and terrible. Corey said, played my 3rd edition monk. Maxing Dex and Wisdom made you feel tanky with the great good save progression, but ultimately it did not have the damage of the fighters and the barbarians and the rogues. Exactly. Even though you were making all these attacks and even though you had like the high damage die value, you just didn't have the raw power to do a lot of damage in 3rd edition. That brings us to Pathfinder 2nd edition. So to be clear, let's kind of walk through it. Monks started off completely busted. They were broken as hell. But by the time we got to 2nd edition, they were out of the game. They brought them back in 3rd edition. But you know what? They didn't really deliver there either. So what then are we to do? Well, turns out the answer was Pathfinder 2nd edition. Because the fact of the matter is the monk is an interesting and cool class, and it deserves, to have its time in the sun. But the class itself has several problems with it, right? Which is, we know that the class, if it has too many special abilities and they're too powerful, the class will be completely broken. And obviously in Pathfinder 2nd edition, the monk can't be doing as much damage as, say, the fighter, right? Because if the monk was doing as much damage as the fighter, then, and it got all these cool special abilities, why would you be a monk? So there's always going to be this challenge of like getting the monk to be kind of balanced and correct. And in my personal opinion, I think Pathfinder 2nd edition crushed it. I think they knocked it out of the park. I think the monk is probably up there for me in terms of being one of my favorite classes in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Obviously, I don't think it's the most powerful. I think sorcerer and fighter and rogue and stuff are more powerful, raw damage classes, raw effectiveness classes. But the monk has, I think, a sweet spot of interesting feats, fun abilities, mathematical effectiveness that really all combine to give you this chassis that I think is a lot of fun to play. And I think that's what makes the class like really, really, cool and compelling. Emperor says, didn't the Pathfinder 1st edition monk have key points to use Flurry of Blows? No, Emperor Epic. They did not. That was for Stunning Fists. That was not for Flurry of Blows. Flurry of Blows just let you, when you full attack, the monk full attacked at a different attack progression than other classes, but that was just a given standard. Ford says, my experience with monks is that they are very cool, but short rest isn't done much. So monks don't get to feel cool. Awesome says, I think the main reason you don't see short rest much is because people often like each session to be separate in 5e. And if you long rest like every session, you don't really need short rests. And again, not to go off on a tangent here, but I think this is part of the problem with 5th edition D&D in general, and it's why I am still very confused as to why it is as popular as it is. I like 5th edition, and Aaron likes 5th edition for one reason. I think it's an okay dungeon crawling game. I see short rest, and my mind goes back to the old school D&D turn structure, where once every 6 turns you had to take a rest or your characters would become exhausted. The idea of exploring a dungeon and taking a long time to do so, fighting several rooms, and then pulling back to a dead end or a room with a door that you can close and bar, and taking some time to eat and recover yourself, and that's your 1 hour short rest before exploring back into the dungeon, and really getting these kind of grindy long days where you're kind of accumulating dozens of encounters. And hey, Gid re-upping their adventure. So welcome to the adventure. Gid with a massive 9 months. And Dirt Guyver doing the same. Dirt Guyver with a 4-month streak. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. So anyways, yeah, like I like that about 5th edition. And apparently that's just, but that's what the way the game is designed, but nobody plays it that way. Everybody plays the game like it's some sort of narrative session-based fluffy bullshit time simulator, and it just and yet they love it, and they keep going back to this game, which is fundamentally designed for a type of play style that they don't do. It's very, very strange to me. PF1 Monk was bad until they released the Unchained version of the class. All right, Unchained versions, we're not talking about those here. There were a lot of, some of the Unchained versions were actually quite broken, so. KC says, I think that was the intention, but the AP zeitgeist took hold and people never played that way. Yeah, I mean, that is the answer to that. Yes, exactly. I think, I don't know if it's 6 to 10, but I think it's like 5 to 8 encounters or something like that a day. It's very high. And my understanding is that for like most people, it's like 1 to 2. And to be honest with you, that's kind of true in Pathfinder 2nd edition as well. So the monk. Now we don't have roles in Pathfinder 2, but I first want to call something out here about the monk, which I really liked about the fighter. The monk does not have any subclasses. There's no rackets. There's no doctrines. There's no muses. A monk can take, all the monks are the same, and then you take whatever feats you want to take. Now, that being said, like our fighter's the same way, a class that I really like. But whereas the fighter sort of built off of a progression of feats that tailored around two-handed fight or two-weapon fighting, sword and board, one-handed weapon and free hand, or big two-handed weapon, the monk sort of builds off of these stances. And there are feats that require you to be in a certain stance or to have a certain stance in order to sort of take that sort of feat. And there's also sort of some stance feats which are more useful in some of the other stances. Now, I will say that I like the stances a lot. And again, we can see here that some of the stances, there's a group of them at level 1, you know, crane stance, dragon stance, gorilla stance. And as you get higher level, there's some other mountain stance, rain of ember stance, reflective ripple stance, stoke flame stance, stumbling stance, tiger stance, wolf stance. Now there's a diminishing return here because you can only be in one stance at once. So picking up a bunch of stances doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Unfortunately, the stances, you know, they give you sort of a lot of variety of the things that you can do. The problem with the stance is much like the barbarian, it takes an action. So it eats up the monk's action economy. But unlike the barbarian, the monk gets 2 really, really cool benefits. This is why I like the monk better than the barbarian. Because yes, the monk, generally speaking, you don't have to enter a stance, but you know, being in a stance is going to be better for you. It's going to activate some of your abilities. It's going to give you better damage, or at least a more compelling damage attack. And it's going to give you a bunch of traits that you're going to be able to add onto your attack. Damien says, monks make great crowd controllers. Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think that's worth talking about. I agree with you. Yes. And I almost consider that a feat tax rule of cool, for sure. It's weird that you can't be in a stance when you're not in combat. Like, what does that even mean? But unlike the barbarian, the monk, number 1. Let's go back to our monk here real quick. Number 1, our monk gets faster movement. So as they go up in level, they're going to be more likely to only have to use 1 stride to reach a foe, whereas like a barbarian might have to use 2. Number 2, and this is most important, they start the game off with Flurry of Blows, which lets you make 2 attacks for 1 action. Again, in my mind, the baseline is the fighter. The fighter goes, they don't have to do shit, they move, and then they attack twice with their 2 actions, right? Cool. The barbarian can't do that. The barbarian has to rage, then move, then attack. 1 attack. Now the monk, like the barbarian, has to, and I use this term loosely, enter a stance, but then they can move, and then they still get to make 2 attacks. So in that perspective, the Flurry of Blows is giving you that action back like right away. And that is such a big difference in a game system where combats can sometimes only be, 3 rounds, 4 rounds long. But also the stance doesn't screw you over with these AC penalties or locking you out of entire parts of the game like Rage does. And you can exit a stance and re-enter a stance, and you have a lot more flexibility. And if you really don't want to, you don't really have to enter the stance. Barbarians pretty much have to enter the stance. If they want to use almost all their feats have the Rage trait, they really need that extra damage. Otherwise, they are just a really, really bad combatant. The monk doesn't feel as priced in like the other classes do. And I really, really like that. So in addition to getting all of these really cool feats, which we're going to get into in a second, let's go ahead and take a look at our friend, the chart, the proficiency chart. So we're going to start with weapon. Now, I'm not going to lie here. I'm going to gripe a little bit just because I feel like I can, and it's my channel. Here's the deal. The monk gets trained at 1st level, expert at level 5, and master at level 13, just like everybody else. You can see how many classes, all the melee classes are sort of on this expert weapon specialization at 7, greater weapon specialization at 15. Here's the problem I have. It bothers me that the fighter is and can be, and at the end of the game is just as proficient with unarmed attacks as the monk. Now, I don't know. I've never actually tried it, but there's a part of me that thinks, man, why isn't the monk expert in unarmed attacks? Like, that just feels like that is such a no-brainer to me. I get it. That's the fighter shtick, but it's like, come on. It's so crazy to me how like a fighter who goes monk archetype is going to be more accurate and be able to hit harder. It's just like, ugh, it's just so painful to me. This always stands out to me as being just kind of like I understand that the math and I get why it's balanced, but like I've always just felt like so bad for the monk that they're not the most accurate unarmed attacks. If anybody should be, it should be the monk. All right. Anyways, a couple things that I did want to mention about the monk though. They do start with a powerful fist. And so instead of D4 damage, their weapons do D6, and they don't get the penalty for attacking with a lethal attack with that non-lethal because their fists are deadly weapons. And by the way, it doesn't have to actually be your fist. It says you know how to use your fists as deadly weapons, but pretty sure the rules of the game stipulate that you can basically unarmed attack with anything. So anyways, they get this ability to actually, do a little, I mean, we're talking about going from D4 to D6. Now, they do not get the D8 and the D10 of, the other classic monks, because that's what's tied up into your stances. So for example, if a monk enters into the dragon stance, they get access to the dragon tail attack, which does D10 damage. And, you can have runes of striking and stuff on your hand wraps, your magical hand wraps. So you can do 2d10, 3d10, 4d10, which is all really, really cool when you consider that your character is essentially still has, free hands, which kind of gets into where monks really shine, which is they can do a lot of other stuff. A lot of other character classes end up having their hands full with, swords and two-handed weapons and shields and stuff, the monk, is fine. George says the best monk is fighter with the monk archetype. I know it is painful. I hate it. I really do hate it. Anyways, let's go back to our details here. So that is kind of annoying, but let's talk about the monk's armor class. Now, they start off only with unarmored proficiency. But now remember, unarmored is 0 points of AC. But you get your up to a maximum of 5 dex. So while they cannot be at 20 dex at level 1, by level 10, they will be at full dex. So you really want, either a stance that's going to give you armor class, or you really want to have an 18 dexterity. But what's really cool about it is they start at expert and they go all the way to legendary. The only other class that does this is a champion. Now the champion is going to be in heavy armor, which is going to give them 6 points of AC. And the monk is going to be unarmored, which is going to be 0 plus 5 points of AC from their dex. So at the end of the day, the champion will have 1 more point of armor class on them. But other than that, the monk will have the highest armor class in the game. And that's pretty sick. I mean, that's pretty sweet. And because of the way that the rune systems work, unarmored, you can put it on your clothes and stuff. You can have the same armor runes as everybody else. You can put them onto your armor. There's some runes that can only go onto heavy armor and stuff. They can't go onto just light armor or unarmored, like robes and clothes. But for the most part, you kind of get to be a really, really solid AC. Roxley says, monks can get +6 if they are shirtless. Yeah, Roxley, but if they're shirtless, they can't put runes on it. That's the only problem. So, pretty sure that you end up being lower than otherwise. Yes, because if you're not literally not wearing any armor, there is no max dex bonus. But if you have any sort of clothing or mage armor spell, the max dex is 5. And you need to have clothing in order to be able to put runes on it. Yes, and it's actually 7 if you get the Apex item. Right. But again, a shirtless monk would get 7 points of dex, and with an Apex item would get 7 points of AC from dex and 0 points of AC from potency rune. Whereas someone wearing clothing would get 5 points of AC from dex and 3 points of AC from potency runes. And they could also put 3 property runes on their armor. So the clothing would get 5 plus 3 is 8, which is higher than the 7 you would get. Look. I'm not saying that it's not in the cards. I think giving up the property runes, though, is well, no. Again, I cannot stress this enough. You don't suffer from stealth penalties and such with unarmored. Yeah. But I'm saying when you're wearing clothing, that doesn't give you armor penalties either. So you're totally fine. I'm just saying wearing clothing and having 3 potency runes is going to give you a higher armor class than having a 7 dex. But as someone pointed out, you don't really get a +3 armor rune until the very, very end of the game. So, it probably all kind of comes out in the wash. Long story short, monks have a great armor class, which is really, really cool, which is really great. And they're very, very fast, which makes them really fun. They are not spellcasters, so we do not get any of this. They get some key abilities, which are focus spells. They're treated as spells, but they don't have any spell slots or anything as such. And their DCs here are not the greatest in the world. And unfortunately, we see a little bit of the 3rd edition stigma come in here. Something I don't like about the monk in our Pathfinder 2nd edition, unfortunately. When you make a monk, you get to choose if you want to be dexterity or strength as a key ability score, something shared by some of the more martially oriented classes. Fighter does strength and dex, I think. The ranger, I think, does strength and dex. I could be wrong about that. Yep. Okay. So only barbarian, no, just strength. Sorry, buddy. But anyways, the monk needs strength if they want to be good at athletics and potentially do a bunch of damage. They need dexterity if they want to have a good armor class. But they're also, you know, a frontline combatant. They probably want a good constitution. But here's the problem. Their key spells, if you pick them up, they use your wisdom as their DC modifier. Now, to be fair, some of your key spells like make you move really quick like a Jedi or heal you. It doesn't matter what your DC is. But there are some that rely on a DC, and it's unfortunate that it taps into wisdom because you're already stretched too thin. And so as a result, I feel like the monks in Pathfinder 2nd Edition are sort of the most like not fantastic monks that we've ever seen. The monk in Pathfinder 2nd Edition really does not feel like some sort of supernatural warrior, in my opinion. Like, it really struggles, I think, with some of the more magical elements of the monk. But at the same time, I think you're a really, really cool, like, martial artist with a lot of cool abilities. And so, you know, I think that that is something that is kind of unfortunate. Yeah, you can have your DC, class DC increase, but it's still tied to wisdom. So, like, your wisdom is always going to be a couple of points behind your key stat. And it's like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to have like an 18 dex and a 16 wisdom? And then what? Your strength is 12 at level 1? Like, that could be pretty brutal. Like, I think the monks feel like they get pulled in a bunch of different ways, which is one of the reasons why I think that monks get a lot better, let's say level 10, because at that point you've had 2 boosts. And so like a lot of your things that started off at like 12 and 14 have been boosted twice and matter for you a great deal. And then, you know, your strength is only good. So you might have started with something at a 14 and now it's an 18 and your key stat has just hit 20. So there's only a 1 point difference between them. Whereas it was a 2 point difference, you know, for the most of the game, which is, I think, something that's relevant. Saves. Monks, awesome. They are awesome at saves. They start off an expert in fort, an expert in reflex, and an expert in will, which is already just totally awesome. It's pretty cool. And on top of that, as you get higher level, you gain this really kind of interesting ability. I want to get the name right here. It is called Path to Perfection, where you get to pick one of your saving throws and it goes to master. And basically you get the save specialization, where if you get a critical saving throw, if you get a success on a saving throw, it's treated as a critical success. But you get to pick whichever one is the most valuable for you. Maybe you want to go with one where you're really, really good at it, or maybe you want to take an ability score that's kind of lagging. You get to choose. And I think that's really, really cool. And at level 7, to have a master and 2 experts is really, really good saves. I mean, there are some classes in the game that basically end the game with master and 2 experts. So for them to be at master, expert at level 7 is insane. Also, while I don't approve of their multiple attribute dependency, the fact is, outside of strength, the 3 other stats that a monk really wants to probably have are dexterity, constitution, and if you care about key at all, wisdom, which are also the 3 saving throw stats. So that is going to further exemplify the fact that these characters are going to have insane saving throws. And only 4 levels later, you get second Path to Perfection. So now you have 2 at master and 1 at expert. And both of the saves that you have at master have save specialization. Incredible. And they're not done yet, because at level 15, not level 19, not level, not end of the game. No, level 15, which I think is like a perfect sweet spot for like cool abilities coming online, because you get to really enjoy them for the rest of the game. You reach your 3rd Path to Perfection, and you take one of them that is master and you make it legendary. So you end up with just this incredible ability to sort of customize your saving throws to be whatever it is that you need them to be. And ending up with legendary in any one save with greater save specialization, and then a master with save specialization, and then an expert is pretty sweet. So it is a good deal for sure. Little Fugue Flute says, it's interesting that you say that the monk struggles to feel mystical and otherworldly, because as I understand it, the Pathfinder 2nd Edition monk intends to focus more on martial artists rather than Orientalism. Little Fugue, I was not aware if that was part of their game design decision, but if it was, they have succeeded, because it is definitely, when we look back at the earlier monk, it's all very much like, Grandmaster of Flowers, very, very, Asia's, the mysterious Orient, right? It was very prominent in those early classes. You could see that. The monk now feels much more rooted in sort of reality, and feels more like a martial artist than a mystical, inscrutable master from the Far East, right? Damien pointing out that, yes, of course, you can also take Canny Acumen at the very end of the game to boost your expert to master. So you end up with legendary, master. Legendary has greater save specialization. One of the masters has save specialization, and then you can use one of your general feats to raise the other stat all the way up to master. That, my friends, is, and you have the best armor, aside from the champion, and you have great armor class. Yeah, the monk is a defensive nightmare. Insane saves all around. Their perception sucks. No way around that. Honestly, this is another one where you could possibly use Canny Acumen. Does anybody know if you could take Canny Acumen twice? Once for perception, once for a save? Maybe you can't. But they do not have a good perception. Kind of sucks. Like someone said, no, you cannot. Okay. You cannot. All right. Well, that sucks, because they are going to have a low perception. And the reason why that could be particularly problematic, I'm going to point something out here. Again, some of you have been playing the class for a while, but we're just talking about the class here, and we're going to get into that. By the way, we've been going now for about an hour and a half. Doesn't look like we're going to get to any of our tip goals today, but that's okay. But I do want to say thank you to everybody who's shown up today, who is enjoying this content. If you're watching now or later, please remember to like and subscribe. If you're interested in being part of these conversations every single day, you don't want to just wait for Tuesdays and Thursdays, then I highly recommend that you check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. Gets you a lot of cool benefits, access to our Discord, which is a private Discord, all the community games that are going on in there. If you come in at our $10 champion level, you get access to our Northern Reaches community game, which is our specialty sort of Pathfinder Society MMO version of Pathfinder 2. A little touch of West Marches. And we also have other benefits that come in at the various higher tiers as well. Special videos, extra PDFs, the whole 9 yards. So definitely recommend checking that out. Maybe it's for you. But again, thank you to everyone who is supporting the channel, and we're gonna keep on keeping on. So yeah, perception not really great here for the monk, unfortunately. And class DC is pretty standard. If you could take Canny Acumen multiple times, everyone would take it 2 to 3 times. That's probably accurate. So about that bad perception and about that bad proficiency, the only problem I really have with this is the game makes you think that you can make a strength monk, which you can. Because now remember, the monk isn't using armor, so they need dexterity in order to give them a proper armor class. So if you go with key ability score strength and sort of sacrifice your dexterity, it seems like you'd be completely shit out of luck. The good news is that there is a stance that is sort of designed around that. It's called the mountain stance. And this is sort of more of like the very tough, rooted, earthbender type martial artist. And unlike the other monks, when you're in the mountain stance, you actually get an item bonus to AC. So you don't need the dexterity as much. Okay. Now, granted, your AC is still capped at 4. Okay. But here's the problem. Because the dexterity modifier is capped at 0. Okay. The problem is you only get this benefit if you're in the stance, which means that until you get the feat at level 12 or 14, where you can enter stance when you roll initiative, if other monsters go before you, you will not be in this stance. And that means your AC will be like 4 points lower than it should be, which is brutal in this game. So like rolling bad on your initiative as a monk when you are relying on mountain stance to give you your AC is brutal. It's absolutely a beating. And unfortunately, there's really no, that I know of, people in chat might be able to chime in here. There's really no good way that I know of to get rid of that. I feel like you're just kind of a shit out of luck. It would be 2 points lower as you have higher proficiency. Well, that is a good point. All right, got it. Yeah, 5e barbarian problem. Bad initiative gets you wrecked before you can rage. Exactly. So it is unfortunate that, you know, that you can not get that benefit. But there's a lot of really cool stances in this game that you can really use to kind of customize your monk. And, you know, I mean, you know, dragon stance is doing D10 damage, but you're a monk. So you're not like having to wield a two-handed weapon in order to do D10 damage. That's pretty cool. You know, because I think there's a lot of things that people, things that people don't appreciate about having hands free. Like you can open doors, you can pull items out. You could be holding the torch or the lantern for your group. You'll always have a hand free to be able to battlefield medicine. You'll always have a hand free to open a door, to grapple or trip somebody, right? So being able to have all of your hands free while still doing this extra, you know, bits of damage and ability of damage is very, very, it's not a small thing. And for a lot of characters who, especially sword and board characters or two-handed fighters, you get to feel like you are locked in to doing this one thing because the action inefficiency to try to swap something out is just not worth it. But a monk can basically just flow between a variety of different options at all the time. And it even only just takes one action to change your stance. So I really, really like the flexibility of the monk. And again, there's a diminishing return here. I don't think, because you can only be in one stance at once. So picking a bunch of stances, you know, is kind of diminishing returns. But they do give you a lot of flexibility and ability to do stuff. Like if you want a more defensive stance, you can go into the crane stance, and that'll give you a +1 circumstance bonus to your AC. So, I will say something. I had a house rule, okay? And my house rule, by the way, was because I hated the idea of monks using shields. Because, like I said, the monks always have two hands free. So you could have one hand free for grappling or for holding a scroll or a potion or doing battlefield medicine. You could make your unarmed attacks with your feet or your head. So you might as well have a shield. I just hate the idea of a monk having a shield. And so one of my house rules was that if you have the deadly fists, if you have the powerful fist class feature, you may, as an interact action, become defensive and get +2 circumstance bonus to AC. AKA, I basically let the monk like use their, you know, forearms or fists as a shield to block. Just because I hate the idea of them. Now, they can't shield block. They would need to get a shield and take the shield block feat to do that. But I just basically say, look, you already have all your hands free anyways. I hate the idea of you having a shield. I'm just going to allow you, if you have the powerful fist class feature, that you essentially can just spend an action and get +2 circumstance bonus to your AC, as if you had a shield. Because to me, like, a monk should be the person who's able to, you know, look, if your fist is so powerful that it's a deadly weapon, then you should be able to block things the way that a shield would as well. So I think that that's a fine I don't think that's so broken that it ruins the game. But real quick, is there anything else we missed here with the monk? I mentioned this before, but I do want to highlight it again. Flurry of blows does not give you any sort of accuracy benefit, right? We know that double slice from the fighter lets you make 2 attacks at essentially 0 map, but for 2 actions. And flurry of blows, like the ranger's quick shot, hunted shot, or twin takedown, lets you make 2 attacks with multiple attack penalty, but is only 1 action. So this is an action point enhancer. It's not really an accuracy enhancer. That is something that I think some people get mistaken. In fact, very early on, I got this wrong. I thought that this let you make 2 attacks essentially at 0 map. So it was really powerful when we first started playing Pathfinder 2nd edition. This is good, but what it really means is that the monk is only going to need 1 action each turn to attack. Making a 3rd attack is usually not worth it, aka an attack with a -10 or a -8 map attack if you have agile weapons. But you're only going to need 1 to flurry. Yeah, granted, they have to be against the same creature, but most of the time you're attacking the same creature anyways. But I mean, actually, no, you can attack 2 different creatures. What am I saying? It's only if they both attack. But anyways, point is, you're going to have 2 actions each turn available to you that you can use to do a bunch of stuff around the battlefield. And assuming you're using Flurry of Blows or Flurry of Maneuvers, which we'll get to in a second, that 3rd action and that 2nd action, that 3rd action should not be anything with the attack trait you are likely to fail. So make sure as a monk that you have access to magic items, to battlefield medicine, maybe even picking up a spellcasting dedication, because you're going to have a lot of actions available to you. You don't, after that first round where you have to enter a stance, unless you're changing stances all the time, you're going to have, because like even the fighter is going to be kind of pressed into like 2 actions for power attack if they're the big power attack, or 2 actions for double slice. You're only priced into 1 action. So as the fight goes longer and longer, the monk ends up with a lot of free actions. And especially when you get haste, and they're very fast. We can see here that they get this incredible movement, which again means that as we get higher and higher level, most things are going to be 1 stride away. So it really behooves you to have a variety of options available to you. And that's what I think makes the monks so fun, is they don't feel, locked into the same, dare I say it, rotation like some of the other classes have, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It just means that there are some classes that are so powerful and have such optimal lines of play that the whole idea is I want to be doing this each round because that's the most effective thing I could be doing. Whereas the monk, I feel like, can really, jump around and do a bunch of different things. Let's see. Level 19, you do get this kind of nod to like the whole like mastery of your physical form ability. Where on your first attack, if you roll lower than 10, you could treat it as a 10. It's a fortune effect, so you can't re-roll it or anything like that. But it is a cool ability, and you get to use it again and again and again and again. And honestly, that's not a bad ability. I mean, but you do get it at the very end of the game. So yeah, like I think a monk spellcaster is really, really compelling, because a monk spellcaster could potentially be in a situation very easily where they get to make 2 attacks and then cast a spell. That's pretty good. 2 attacks, electric arc. I'm in for that. That seems pretty good. And, the monk gets the benefit of being high maneuverability, high armor class. I don't know. I think there's a lot to really like about combining the monk with things that take up actions, and let you be, pretty powerful and effective at that. Now, all that being said, the monk feats are great. The monk feats are, isn't that what made the 6th pillar archetype broken? I believe so. I mean, in addition to having other completely broken things about it. Yeah, it's fixed now. Rule of Cool says medic monks is a really good idea given speed and AC and +4 against attack of opportunity. Absolutely. And you could do that with spells. You could do that with treat wounds, battlefield medicine. Yeah, I haven't really delved into that, but I just like the idea of having this class that is just really, really a nice chassis for so much stuff. But, archetyping here is rough because, there are a lot of cool feats. We've talked before about some of the classes in Pathfinder 2 really struggle to have really interesting feat choices. And a lot of times too, like, okay, I went the ruffian racket. Well, that means that everything that says it requires a thief, I'm out. Everything that says it requires mastermind, I'm out. Everything that says it requires eldritch trickster, I'm out. Or arcane trickster or whatever, I'm out. So you get priced out of all these things. And while the monks definitely do have certain things that require, prerequisites, like, this requires flurry of blows, but, you start with flurry of blows. The fact of the matter is most of the stances have like one, maybe two feats that are sort of like the upgrade feat to that stance. But for the most part, but again, you could take multiple stances. There's no reason why you couldn't. So, it's pretty cool that you can kind of really just customize your monk and really go in a different direction and not feel like you're just locked into the same abilities over and over and over and over again. Now, I do think that they put too many stances in. I'm not going to lie. Some of them are uncommon, but they put in way too many stances because you're never going to need all these stances, and there's no reason for them to be this many in the game. So I am throwing that out there. There are too many stances. But I mean, some of these feats are just really, really fun and cool. And even if they're not going to come up a lot, I think you're going to be stoked to get to be able to do things like wall run. Like, that's really, really cool. Little Foog says there are a lot of cool feats, but realistically, a lot of people, this is true, that you are correct. A lot of people are playing with free archetypes, so that makes it easier to get those archetypes in. I play Bard, so I need like every Bard feat. Absolutely. I think Bard, by the way, is a great example of a class that if you're not playing with free archetype, you are probably never going to take a feat outside of your class. And I feel like monks are kind of the same way. I mean, you can get a little bit of away from them after you pick up a couple of core critical abilities. I don't love that Stunning Fist is a feat now. It is an incapacitation effect, so you're not really going to be able to use this against any sort of bosses. And it's only stun on a failure. It's stun 3 on a critical failure, which is not bad. You also have to target the same creature with 2 strikes, and one of them has to hit. So again, if you're going up against a higher level opponent, this is pretty useless. If you're going up against a lower level opponent, you're more likely to hit at least once, and they might fail the Fortitude save, but then stunning them doesn't really accomplish as much. Stunning Fist is unfortunately the weakest that we've ever seen it. It was super powerful in 3rd edition. Stun was a great condition. If they failed that stun, they were out for the whole turn. They dropped everything that they were holding. It was a really bad status. And obviously, early Stunning Fist was insane. Unfortunately, Stunning Fist in Pathfinder 2nd edition is not as potent. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick it up, but it's skippable. It's skippable. Just getting here. Hope you cover the monk alpha turn. Attack 4 times. Right. A monk can go flurry of blows, attack. That's 4 attacks. And if they're hasted, attack. That's 5 attacks. That is a cool turn. No, it is not, as Boothby notes with his sarcasm. Yeah, Whirling Throw is interesting. So, well, we're actually really cool. Let's talk about that a little bit. So one thing that I think the monk is really good at, because they have all these open hands, is combat battlefield control. I think it deserves to be stipulated this again, which is grapple is a great. We've covered this in combat and tactics. Trip and grapple are both incredible maneuvers, because they can really give your group a huge benefit. Grapple can essentially, it is the most powerful form of crowd control, that non-magical crowd control that we have in the game, because they have to escape. Escaping takes an action. It is not guaranteed. The escape action has the attack trait. So pass or fail, they will accumulate multiple attack penalties, meaning even if they manage to escape their second attack and then they move, they will get one attack at -5, which is fantastic. And you did all that for grappling them. It's one action. Grapple is incredible. Now, of course, when an opponent's grappled, they might just say, I'm just going to wail on you instead. But you're a monk, and you have this really good armor class, and they gave you 10 hit points. The monk has always been at D8 or lower class. They gave the monk 10 hit points in this edition. The monk is pretty beefy, and having people wail on you is a pretty powerful thing. On the other side, trip, we all know, is extremely powerful because being prone sets up a laundry list of advantages, not the least of which is that in order to stand up, you have to burn an action, and that provokes attacks of opportunity from, say, everybody in your party that has attack of opportunity, which if you're level 6 or higher, should be most of your characters. Certainly your barbarians, fighters, and paladins or champions. And even the monk themselves ends up getting their own form of attack of opportunity called standstill, which is not as good as attack of opportunity, but still would allow them to make a free attack with no multiple attack penalty. Attacks of opportunity are one of the best ways that you can be getting use out of, people call it the 3-action economy, but it really should be thought of as the 4-action economy. Each turn, at the start of your turn, you get 3 actions and 1 reaction. And the most efficient and effective plays are going to be ones where you get to make use out of all 4 of those actions each and every combat turn. So I really like being able to set people up for that. Grappling is great, tripping is great, but the best part is they target different saves. And there might be some, but like if a creature has a high fortitude save, like it's a big brute, it probably has a bad reflex save. And if the creature's really nimble and dodgy and has a high reflex save, chances are pretty good that it has a bad fortitude save. And sometimes it's like a spellcaster and it has medium to bad saves in both. And then you can just completely hose it. I mean, you think it's bad enough to trip an opponent or grapple. Imagine tripping them and then grappling them. Now they are stuck on the ground. They have to escape. And after they escape, they're still on the freaking ground. It's insane. And again, the monk could do all this because they're always going to have a bunch of hands free. In addition, they do pick up some abilities that make them a little bit more effective at doing what I just described. One of the examples of this is we all know Flurry of Blows lets you strike a bunch of times, but we also get at level 4 Flurry of Maneuvers. And when you Flurry of Blows, you can replace it with fuck shove, grapples and trips. That means for one action, we could do a grapple trip. Or a trip grapple. For one action. That's insane. And I mean, I think that Flurry Maneuvers is slept on by a lot of people. I really like this feat. I think this feat is really interesting and it's going to let you feel different. Now, of course, I pointed this out before. You can't all just be support characters, all right? That, you got to, this is why I appreciated 4th edition D&D for its roles, right? Know your role. Like if you're the monk and you're like, oh, I'm going to tie everybody up and they're not going to be able to do anything. And then the other character's like, oh yeah, I'm going to demoralize them. And then I'm going to cast a debuff spell. And then like the other person's like, yeah, and I'm going to buff us and I'm going to, okay, who's doing the damage here? Know who is your primary damage dealer. We use things like Flurry of Maneuvers so that we can free up our other character classes who might not be as defensive to really pour on the damage. So make sure that your group has the rogues and the maguses and the sorcerers and, your other classes that can do a shitload of damage in your party structure before you go and build this kind of monk, because there's no point controlling if there's nobody to take advantage of it. Emperor Epic says, it is strange because wanting to take all the feats of your class should be a good thing, but it actually feels restricting because you don't get the opportunity to look at archetypes. Emperor Epic, that is a very interesting take. And it is kind of, so there's a saying in Magic the Gathering, there's a very powerful counterspell called Force of Will. And Force of Will has been around for a long time, but Force of Will can be used even if you have no mana available, no magical power. You just have to throw away a blue card from your hand. And people will say, people will talk about how even a crappy blue card, it's better to have a bad blue card in your hand than a good blue card in your hand, because that way you won't feel bad when you throw it away in order to cast Force of Will. And it's kind of an interesting thing. People talk about how bad the champion's feats are, and they are right. They are pretty bad. But now sometimes people talk about it with almost it's great. You can just archetype and it doesn't matter because the class feats are not that great. And it's kind of interesting that when you have a class like a bard or a monk, I would really not think ever of archetyping away from them because I like their class features. But in some ways that kind of, locks them in. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, I really like the maneuvering monk. And somebody mentioned that, is this the one, crushing grab? Yeah. Look, I'm not going to, say that these are all winners. This one. Whenever you successfully grapple a creature, great. You deal bludgeoning damage equal to your strength modifier. We're talking about 3 or 4 points of damage. This is, look, it's still Pathfinder 2nd edition. This is a bad feat. Don't take this feat. I was looking for... Whirling Throw. Here we go. Level 6. So what's really nice about this is one of the things I really like about spell casting with a monk is for one action, boom, boom. I attack twice. Now my multiple attack penalty is at -10. Great. I'm going to use a spell which relies on a saving throw, which is unaffected by multiple attack penalty. They're on different operational levels. Whirling Throw uses a saving throw. Your opponent makes a fortitude save. So even after you come in and you flurry of blows and you grapple someone and then punch them with the other flurry of blows and do something else on your turn, and then you could whirling throw them, you're going to hurl them a certain amount of distance, and they're going to take a reasonable amount of damage, and potentially, if you knock them prone first and then throw them, they're going to be 30, 40, 30 feet away, prone, and have just taken a bunch of damage from you. It's a pretty good maneuver. And to say nothing of the fact of you could, throw them over the cliff or throw them over an edge. It's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, they get flurry of blows at first level, GM Scott, for free. They get flurry of blows for free. That just comes with the monk chassis for free. But you do need to pick up flurry of maneuvers at level 4 with a feat. You cannot throw them over a cliff. The rules for force movement only allow pushes or pulls. Well, that is a very razor-ish thing. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Why do fists not have the grapple trait? It's a great question. Some of them do. If you go Gorilla Slam gains the grapple trait. Remember, all that the grapple trait means, Jackal Torn Moons, is that the item bonus that you get to your weapon, +1 weapon, +1 potency, +2 potency, you can apply as an item bonus to an athletics check to grapple. So it doesn't matter if your fist has the grapple trait, because you could still make an athletics check to grapple. The only thing that the trait does is it allows you to sort of double dip. And if you've put in a bunch of, item potency into that weapon or into your unarmed strikes, that you can then apply that to your check. Now, to be fair, you might already have something like lifting belt or bracers of athleticism, which give you an item bonus to your athletics, and it kind of cancels out because you can't stack those bonuses. But that is why that is mostly for flavor. You know, the only time that the grapple trait really matters is if it's on, like, you know, a reach weapon or something. Emperor says, that is the dumbest Paizo's razor ever. And if you tell that to a player, you are lame. Are you lame, Emperor Epic, or are you following the rules? Well, okay, let's specifically read Whirling Throw here. All right. You propel a grab creature a great distance. You can throw the creature any distance up to 10 feet. Now, what's interesting here is somebody says, like, what direction could you throw them? Could you throw them up into the air? If you successfully throw the creature, it takes bludgeoning damage equal to your strength modifier plus 1d6 for every 10 feet you threw it. Now, it doesn't specify here that you're throwing them, that you can't throw them straight up, and then they'll take falling damage as well. But my guess is you cannot. Because that would be really powerful, because then you would do this damage and they would take falling damage. And because they took falling damage, they would be automatically prone, and that would be completely broken. So obviously you cannot do that. What's interesting is this does not say anywhere on this description that this is forced movement. So because this is not forced movement, does that provoke attacks of opportunity? Probably not, but well, that's the problem. This is not forced movement. I mean, obviously it's forced movement, but it doesn't specifically say that this is forced movement. It sure sounds like forced movement, but it is not forced movement. Well, you know, we get all these rules and somehow still get things, you know, that fall through the cracks. I don't know. Here, I'll put a poll up. Curious. All right. Would... All right. Poll is up. Answer now. Man, you know, I thought, you know, I got to be honest with you guys. I thought that the monk would be really a popular stream, but we do not have a lot of people here tonight, and we've been pretty dead in terms of activity. I'm kind of surprised. Oh well. What else have we got here? Most things don't call out in the ability that it's forced movement. Got it. Darth Gorlak just came in. Wait, just came in. Forced movement can do more than just push-pull. Because you're not acting to move, this doesn't trigger reactions that are triggered by movement. Okay. All right. So, results of our poll are in. They say that 95% of you said you would allow. 94% of you said you would allow someone to whirling throw someone off a cliff. John, did I pick wrong? No, John. I mean, John, listen. You know, you were the top supporter, so I mean, I'm happy to do it. I was just kind of surprised. That's all, especially because it's a class that I like. I mean, John, we're probably gonna get to it eventually. I would think. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe people are just done. They don't want to hear about these classes anymore. One gripe I have, but I guess is that for balance issues, that so many things like not triggered by forced movement. Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you. Can I link this poll as a source when my Northern Reaches character gets more than throw? That's gonna have to be a call. A call that we make. No, Thursdays are usually about the same as Tuesdays. It all depends. It usually comes down to what the topic is. Yeah, it's possible. We change it up. I mean, not every day is Tuesday. The thing is, I've tried to get used to like Thursdays being our stream days, because Tuesdays are going to be our root stream days going forward. So it's kind of interesting. We're kind of trying to go for that. All right. I, for one, am happy to watch your class videos, because every time you feature a different TTRPG, I just go, well, got to buy a new game. I apologize, and I'm also honored. But there is that effect, when I talk about the games that we all already own, at least you don't have to worry about going out and having to buy a new game. So that is definitely true. Yeah, that's true, Hassel. It's probably a big travel week. Absolutely. So let's kind of wrap up here, because we're getting close to 9 o'clock. Now I'm drooling over Fabula Ultima. Yeah, I was pretty impressed with that game, and it was really awesome. I don't know if you saw, but like the game designer who wrote the book came in and we had a great conversation in our YouTube comments. They answered some of my questions and kind of provided some cool feedback, and like they seemed like they were pretty stoked on our take from Fabula Ultima. And so that was pretty cool to have like that fun little interaction with the game designer. So it's possible, Casey. Look, I'm not sweating it at all. I mean, like, one thing we were talking about earlier today is quick aside is Knights of Last Call. I used to lose money every month between the studio and paying for premium services and high-speed internet and sound copyright licenses and all this other stuff. So I used to lose money every month, and I would make a video, and it wouldn't, you do a couple thousand views, which is pretty common for Pathfinder 2nd edition. And that might make me $20, but that was not going to pay the bills. And so when we started going live, we started getting tips, and tips were great. They kept us afloat. And so that was really a strong incentive for us to do live streams. Now that we are getting such a big Patreon, we have, almost 350 people on our Patreon. Our Patreon is large enough that at a certain point, I love the tips. I love the appreciation. I love the super chats. It is super, super, super awesome. But our Patreon is the heart of our show now, in a real meaningful way. And don't get me wrong, there are still streams that's like, we suddenly do, $100 or $200. And it's like, that's a big chunk of change for the channel. That's at least half a new light. But the Patreon has just been so supportive now, and people have been upgrading like crazy. And as a result, I feel a little bit freer to kind of talk about, shows or do systems or do videos that might not get a lot of views, just because I know that the patrons are there to support me. So, all right, but people who are thinking of Pathfinder 2nd Edition should wait for the republish this fall. Well, I would say this little fugue. I wouldn't buy the game. I mean, all the rules are available for free on Archives of Nethys. Or if you play on Foundry, you can get all the rules there for free as well. A lot of people play that way anyways. That being said, some of the rules are going to change, and it might get confusing. So I don't think you miss out if you just want to wait until October or whatever, for the new set of rules to come out, or the new set of classes to come out, because you don't want to get confused about what something does. At the same time, I don't think you really need to. I think you can start playing whenever you want. Did I actually tag them in my review this time, unlike Modifius? No. The Fabula Ultima person found... Actually, Bob, I think, did hashtag Fabula Ultima. He did not tag the actual game designers, but when he made his Twitter post, he did a hashtag Fabula Ultima, And that is how they originally found out that we were doing the stream. Not because we tagged them, but because we just hashtagged the game. And so maybe they have a script, or maybe they have a social media manager who looks for that type of thing, or maybe the person just does it themselves. But either way, that's how they discovered that we had done the stream then. Conversely, I bought the CRB and playtest editions after the remaster was announced. Why would you do that? Maybe the playtest edition, I guess, because it's like a fun artifact of where the game was. But why would you buy the CRB, Darth Gorlock? That's weird. I need an answer. Limited edition. Okay. So the monk went from being a very broken, powerful class that required insane ability scores to qualify for it, to leaving the game entirely, to coming back in 3rd edition and really suffering from a lot of core balance issues and multiple attribute dependency, and never really delivered on its promise. And now it has reached the point where in Pathfinder 2nd edition, I think this is a solid B class. It is not S tier. It is not, it's B to A range. It's probably B in power, A in fun, honestly. I think there's a lot of different fun things that you can do with this class, because in combat, which is mostly what we're talking about, actions are everything. Actions are key. And because of their increased movement and because of flurry of blows, maybe flurry of maneuvers, the monk is, in my personal opinion, going to just have an extra action each turn that other classes do not get. So I really like that, because it makes me feel like I can do 2 different things, maybe 3 different things in a single round. Like a monk could, without haste, attack twice, battlefield medicine, raise a shield. That's a great turn. A monk could attack twice, cast a spell. Short of having haste, no one can do that. So I think that is really, really, really fun that the monk has that kind of flexibility in their chassis and their makeup. So I really, really like it. Great saves, great defenses, and honestly, attack. Fighter's great. But if you look at Pathfinder 2nd edition, okay, if we go over to an Excel chart here, okay, all right, if we will this let me type? No, because it's locked. Hold on a sec. All right. If we look at Pathfinder 2nd edition and we look at attacking, okay, we know that we can get we can get item bonus of 3. We know that we can get a status bonus of 3, and we know that we can get a circumstance bonus of 4 from like an aid. So we can increase our attack bonus by 10. But armor class defenses, saves, right? You can get 3 points out of your runes, but those tend to be higher level runes, so they're typically delayed. Status bonus, you are hard pressed outside of maybe the inspired defense ability, which is like been augmented by greatness or whatever. You're hard pressed to get more than 1 point of status bonus to your armor class. And then for circumstance bonus, for most people, the best you're going to be able to get is 2. And that's when you like raise a shield or take cover. Yes, there's greater cover, but like that typically is a very niche such circumstance. And so you end up only having like 6 points of ways to improve your armor class, and you have 10 points of way to improve your attack bonus. So having high defenses in this game is kind of worth more because there's less ways to make it up. And the monk, again, really great saves, hands down the best saves in the game. Second only to the champion, who beats them out a little bit on 1 point of armor class. Like, they are just an incredibly strong defensive class, and they have 10 hit points. So that kind of like frees you up to go do a bunch of cool stuff. And again, with that high defense, what better way to make the opponent regret, make the opponent have to deal with your defenses than doing things like tripping and grappling them, which is going to force them into playing, your game, which is great. Sure. The Monk in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is well equipped to do the classic sort of spring attack maneuver. High speed, which might take them 2 actions to cover the distance, right? You run in, flurry, maybe a flurry of maneuvers. So you trip first, you succeed, they fall. Your second attack is a fist, but it's agile. So instead of -5, it's -4. But they're prone now, so they're flat-footed. So really, it's more like a -2. And then you move 50 feet back. So now, if they wanted to, they'd have to stand up, 1 action, stride, 2 actions, stride again, and that's their whole turn. It's very, 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 very cool. Obviously you need to work with your party to do that, but like it is, it's pretty cool. If we need to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, we open up the Excel or we go to the whiteboard. It's pretty cool. Yeah, Monk is a really nice one to have fun with the 3-action economy. I agree with that. And like a hasted Monk is just like on a whole other level. You could just be everywhere, doing everything, every turn, very, very fun class. Love it. And I think that's what really comes down to. Yeah, I think the class is good. I think it competes. I think it works mathematically. It's very solidly in the middle of the game. But you get cool feats. Your baseline abilities are fun and interesting to use. You don't feel like you're having to pay such a powerful tax like Rage does. And we haven't got into it yet, but Hunt Prey is great, except if you have to do it 2 or 3 times a fight, in which case you start to really, really hate yourself. And so the Monk has, all the drawbacks that the non-fighter classes have, where they have to do something to turn them, their character on. But I feel like the Monk is probably the best equipped class, maybe outside the Rogue, at sort of making up for that shortcoming, and I think that's what's really, really great about it. All right. So that's the Monk. And question, what do you use for your whiteboard? Is it some kind of Wacom? It is exactly a Wacom. This is a Wacom Intuos Pro. That is what I use. The Bluetooth version. And this is my stylus. Darth, I think you joined late, but the one thing I did say about the Pathfinder 2nd Edition of the Monk is the mystical spellcasting stuff feels like a very distant thought in the design of the class, and they suffer because wisdom is not tied to their key stat, and their key stat is wisdom, which isn't their key stat, if that makes sense. And their key stat is not strength or dex, and their class DC. So what ends up happening is it's pretty easy to make the saves against it. Wait, again, Darth, you're late to the stream. No, I'm going to be adding LED strips to my shelf so that my books glow and you can see their titles even when they're in the back darkness behind me. Wait, can my Pathfinder 2nd Edition Monk talk to plants? That's a great question. Can the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Monk? I don't know the answer to that. Oh, wait. I saw a tongue on the sun and the moon. Boom. Level 14. Oh. This is the most Pathfinder 2 Razor thing I've ever seen. And that's saying something. You're level 14. You could take any of these busted, broken feats. Other people are taking crazy, ridiculous ass archetypes and they're gaining some. And you go, you know what? No, I want to take the tongue on the sun and the moon because monks have gotten this ability for free for 50 years. And damn it, I want it. I want to be able to talk to plants and trees. And you can't even talk to plants and trees. Just give me that. What is there some game balance thing that I don't know about that makes talking to plants and animals at level 14 a problem? Like, that has been the way that this ability has worked since 1974. It's a level 14 feat, for God's sake. You couldn't talk to plants in Pathfinder First Edition either? That is a shame. I don't know if I believe you. No. Look. It says you can speak with any living creature. A living creature includes a plant. So just saying. They really want to push those leshies on you. Yeah. It's all part of, it's big pharma, big leshy. They're just trying to co-op it. They don't want the monks moving in on their exclusive domain of plant talking. Yes. Look, I probably not. I don't know. They probably speak Druidic, right? Or Sylvan or something. Right. I'm going to archetype into Druid just so I can speak plants and animals. I mean, if you take Tongue of Sun and Moons at level 14, like, I think you should be able to talk to plants and animals. Right. You could talk to them. They might not say anything interesting back. And again, I want to say thank you to everybody. Again, tomorrow is the 2-year anniversary of the Knights of the Last Call Patreon. And as I've said many times tonight, that is what really keeps us afloat. That's what keeps us going. And, I really try to put a lot of my energy and effort into the Patreon and making sure that there is a wealth of activity there, an incredibly built up community with a lot of activity there. If you're not a member of the Patreon, let me assure you, this is not like other Patreons that you've been a member of or may have been a part of or other Discords that you may have been a part of. Myself, Bob, Smith, the Knights of Last Call, we are on that server more than anyone else except for Ben. There's a lot of content creators who barely go onto their Discords. I'm on mine every single day, at least several hours a day. So, it really is an opportunity to not only speak with me, but to speak with my community, which is quite frankly, an even better resource than me. So I think the Patreon is an incredible value. And if you go for like our $10 or $25 value level, I think you'll get a wealth of extra goodies and abilities. We're actually sweetening the pot starting next month, July. Our champion and hero tier members are going to get these tickets, which you can use to get cool merch and fun access to fun events, play in games with me, just all sorts of really, really cool stuff. And that's what makes it really such a good community.
Darth Gorlock tipped $15.
Hey.
Cheers to the 2-year anniversary. Clinking beer mugs.
Thank you, Darth Gorlock. And as I said, as we go through the rest of this year, I'm going to be shouting out as we go up to a stream some of our patrons who have been with us for 2 years as they come up on their 2-year anniversary. These are people who were started with us when we had a couple hundred subs, and basically just not even half a channel. And they somehow found us, this group of people who are muddling their way through Rise of the Rune Lords and occasionally started to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Compelling enough to say, hey, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to give you money each month. So, I appreciate everything that every single person has ever done to this. Damien says, I joined the Discord at $5. Now I'm a senior mod and a hero, by the way, which is $25. And I'm thinking about paying $50. Right. Dirt. I remember you guys trying to get to 100. Yeah. I mean, it's been an incredible ride. And again, as much as I'd like to take credit for it, it's not really me. It really is the community that has sort of self-sustained itself. People come in and they might come in because of me or Bob or Aaron, but they stay because of the community. And, there are some people in our community who, in my opinion, in the context of Knights of Last Call, are just as important as me. These are people who are running 2, 3, 4 games a month, sometimes 2 games a week for our community members. They're engaged in conversations. They're answering newbies' questions, and they're getting into the deep weeds of other system talks or gaming philosophy talks with other players. And that it's just so rewarding and so awesome, and I love to see it happen. Serious says tickets and cool merch sold. Yeah. We take a lot of the money that we make and we put it back into the channel. We want it to be a fun experience for everybody. And I think that's what makes it such a cool community. Melissa says, I wish I had found you earlier. Thanks to you to night school. Yeah. I'm hoping to eventually get some night schools back. I enjoyed that format, and I love being able to do these live streams and talk with you all and get this kind of cool chat back and forth. But sometimes it means that, the streams move a little bit slower, or there could be some tangents. So it's always nice to be able to sort of just say, hey, Bob, let's sit down. Let's, just focus on each other, and let's focus on the topic and make something that's really, dense and tightly paced. I joined to get the opportunity to play more. Now I'm paying and still not playing. That's your own fault. That's your own fault. That's your own fault. There are plenty of opportunities for you to be a player. You just keep running games. In addition to playing the Witcher, I've also bought a metric crap ton of new RPG books. GM Scott, I saw that your old thread got your neck got necro today, where you said, by the way, for those of you who want to see the horror show, this is what Knights of the Last Call made me buy in 2022, and it was just this library of books that GM Scott bought in 2022 because of Knights of the Last Call. Are we going to do a Blades in the Dark stream for the 2-year anniversary special? Well, tomorrow's Friday, and I'm actually going to be playing Legend of the Five Rings over at Aaron's house. It's going to be really exciting. They're going to be, they're in the Imperial capital, Otosan Uchi, and they have an appointment, or they're making an appointment to go speak to this Crane diplomat who used to be Kaz's ex-lover and is currently the spouse of the sort of missing / possibly disgraced younger brother of their daimyo, their lord. And they're basically walking into the den of the enemy, into the Cobra's nest, and on her terms in a political arena. And it's going to be a very, very tense intrigue system. We're going to get to use the social combat rules from Legend of the Five Rings. I think it's going to be really awesome. Only played 3 games in 1.5 years. Well, GM Scott, one of the things I'm hoping to do with the ticket system is for some of our higher tier members, mostly our $25 or higher members, I'm going to try to create opportunities, events that are going to allow more people to get a chance to play games with me. I'm going to try to make it more of a priority to get a couple of games out a month, as many as I can, because I really want to have the opportunity to play with more of my community. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. And hopefully that's an opportunity for some of these super awesome game masters who are running games all the time to get a chance to not only play a game, actually get to be a player, but also get a chance to maybe play a new game that they haven't played before, and something that I'm more familiar with, and I can sort of introduce you to and walk you through. And I think that'll be really, really fun. Darth Gorlock won't be happy till all streams are Blades in the Dark streams. Derek needs to highlight other games too. Listen, I love Blades in the Dark. It still might be my favorite design game. Blades in the Dark gives me the tools as a game master. It gives me all the tools that I want and need to feel like I am empowered to do the kind of game mastering that I want to be able to do. I adore the system, and I think John Harper is a genius, and I love everything he makes. Hello, Cal. That's all right. You can always catch the VOD. All right. So, couple things. Next Tuesday, this remains to be seen. We'll talk about this on the Patreon, on the Discord. Next Tuesday is July 4th, which is why we won't be doing Root. Aaron, Bob, families, holidays, fireworks, kids, the whole rigmarole. I don't have any of that. I'm definitely not going to fireworks. I could probably hear them out of my window anyways, if I really cared to. I don't know if I'm going to stream, though, because I don't know how popular it's going to be. Obviously, tonight was a pretty quiet night. We didn't have a lot of people here, and, we didn't do a lot of tips or super chats, so it was kind of a quieter night, which is fine. by the way. Totally fine. I'm just saying I don't know if we're going to do a Tuesday stream. So we'll let, kind of the patrons weigh in and see if we want to do something. But if we do a stream on Tuesday, I have zero expectations for it because, I'm probably not going to get a lot of people showing up. So we might do something, more off the wall. So could always do like an EU stream. Yeah. So what would that mean? Doing it earlier, Darth? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, that's not bad. Maybe that's an interesting idea, Darth. I don't hate that idea. I'll be there if you go live, my friend. Well, I don't know that I would be going live from the studio there, Dirt. I might be just going live from my office, but good to know. I like that you're available, already offering to be available. It's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I expect for most people to be fairly busy, at least here in the U.S., which is the majority of our audience. So, all right. So, to sum up, the Monk's great. I'm a big fan of it, and very happy that they did a good job on it, because I think that this class isn't overpowered, and I don't think that it's boring. I think that it's fun and flexible. It takes great advantage of the action economy of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It gives you all the tools that you need in order to be able to do a variety of different things. It doesn't lock you in to a subclass. It lets you really explore the space, and I think that makes it a really, really fun class. Tim, $5, says GURP stream. You mean the generic universal role-playing system? I don't know what edition my GURPS is. I probably have like GURPS 3rd edition or something, or 4th edition. It's very old. I would never do a stream on GURPS. I don't think that I would be qualified to talk about that, but I would have some thoughts about it. I mean, I didn't hate it. It was actually one of my first non-D&D games that I ever bought. I remember seeing it up at the comic book store that was down the street from me, which was served as my gaming store, and the store owner being like, D&D, well, that's a baby's game. GURPS could do anything. It's for the really creative people out there who really want to do anything. And I was like, oh, that's me. I want to be cool and mature, and this is like pre White Wolf, or like White Wolf was just starting to kind of enroach into people's, become more mainstream, and so I was like, oh, I gotta get it. Refer all the 4th is the newest one. Okay, I think I might have 2nd edition. Let me take a look here. GURPS. Maybe it's 1st edition. I probably got mine in 1994. That's probably exactly when I got it, 94, 95. So that would have been 3rd edition revised. Yep, that's exactly what I have, according to this art. Yeah, I have GURPS Basics. I have the GURPS, Steve Jackson's GURPS 3rd edition basic set revised. That is the book I have. Anyways, full disclosure, I haven't played since the early 90s. Guess what? Neither have I. A Dune 2D20 stream. Ken, fun story. I was at Origins, and I stopped by it. I think I talked about this on our Origins stream. I stopped by the booth at Modifius, and I was talking about Dune. And I was talking about Star Trek Adventures and how excited I was, and how we are really excited about it on the channel. And the person was like, have you reached out to us to talk about a sponsorship? And I was like, no, I just do these things for fun. And he's like, dude, get in contact. He gave me somebody's contact. He's like, let us send you free shit. He's like, you have a sizable audience. You're not nobody. And I was like, eh. And I was like, can I just buy these books instead? And so I bought a bunch of Dune 2D20 books while I was there, which is really cool, which I learned from the Modifius people. They have, I don't know how they do it. And I asked the guy, I said, how do you get all of these IPs? And he said, honestly, the owner of Modifius, he goes, is a wizard. He just calls people up and says, I want your license. And they say, sure. And he's like, I don't know how he does it either. It's insane. But what's really, really cool is they have such a good relationship with Tolkien, Middle Earth, whatever it's called. Incorporated LLC or whatever. They have such a great relationship with Tolkien's estate. They have such a good relationship with Herbert's estate. They have permission from those licensees, those license holders, to add canonical information to the game. So like the Modifius just came out with a book about like the great houses of the Landsrod from Dune, and they are adding to the canonical world of Dune. They have that like level of trust from the license holder. It's incredible. Like they're really doing a great job, which is incredible. Oh yeah, I watched it about 5, maybe 6 times. And the last like 30 seconds of that, just complete chills. You know, when he yells out in I guess it's some probably Chokabsa or whatever. I think that's the language the Fremen speak, Chokabsa, Chakobasa. You know, long live the fighters. Walking as the Padisha Emperor, Shaddam IV of House Carino. I love it. I love everything about it. It was awesome. It was incredible. Definitely going to be watching that one at IMAX for sure. I want to hear Derek's concept of a semi-classless RPG system. Yeah, Warrior, Adept, Expert. Yeah, I love that idea. I've been in love with that idea since 3rd edition D&D. And yes, Fantasy Age does do that. So does Numenera or Cypher, but specifically Numenera does it as well. Shadow Edgelord, Shadow the Demon Lord does it, I think is what you're talking about, Darth Gorlock. Yeah. The other thing, which I really want to do at some point, is I want to make my own version of Powered by the Apocalypse. Because I have like a cool idea of something that I want to do for the patrons, for the ticket holders. And I kind of want to run like a dungeon, but like a classic dungeon that I love. But I don't want to use Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I don't want to use like basic D&D or like 1st edition AD&D. I want to use Powered by the Apocalypse, but I don't want to use Dungeon World. So it's like I want to combine like Dungeon World with Blaze in the Dark, with Torchbearer, with Avatar and Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and maybe a couple other RPGs. And I want to create what is like, for me, the perfect PBTA dungeon adventure system. Something in that space. There's a couple of key things that and I really like certain elements from Legend of the Five Rings / 2D20. Those are completely separate systems, but they both have this approach-based system, which I just absolutely love. And I think I have a cool way that I could do that in PBTA. But anyways. But will there be monks in it? I don't know. That's a great question, Ken. I don't. My gut instinct is to say no. What would you take from Avatar Legends for that? Seems like not much would fit. Specifically, what I really like, Darth Gorlock, in Avatar Legends is I like that Avatar Legends has the condition track, and I like that it also has the exhaustion boxes, the harm boxes. I like that as a player, you can use those exhaustion boxes to sort of empower abilities or get better results on certain things. But when you're eating up exhaustion boxes, it means that when you do take damage, you have to mark a condition instead. And then for the character who doesn't use those exhaustion boxes, it's you have more freedom to mark those instead of a condition. And restoring exhaustion is typically easier than restoring conditions. And so exhaustion kind of represents that short-term resource, kind of like like the shield in Halo is the explanation I always use. And the conditions are sort of more of your long-term resource. And so there's a cool balance between the two of those that you don't get in any place. But for me, you don't get in other systems, but for me is a very important part of dungeon crawling. And like that D&D sort of play pattern. I like the idea of managing short-term resources and long-term resources. Or I should say short-term resources and medium-term resources. And as long as like those two cycles are moving kind of in between one another and there's like a flow between them and you're giving the player lots of choices, that's what I really like about specifically that exact thing from Avatar. I also think I really like having played it at Origins, I love the way that balance moves work, and I love the way that the principles tie in, and I love the ability to sort of be powerful when your balance is off whack and your principle is really, really skewed, to freedom versus responsibility. And if you're really, really far over on freedom, that is a liability because a character could, someone could make you lose your balance and, you might do something you regret. But I also love that you can live up to your principle, and that makes you extremely powerful in the game. There is a part of that play pattern that I really enjoy as well. Anyways, I went off on a long ass tangent here. Listen, all the best RPGs are they should be. If you read any of these really great RPGs, you're going to see a list that says, most of them are going to say Avery Alder's Monster Hearts, D. Vincent Baker's Apocalypse World, John Harper's Blades in the Dark, right? Like they all list like their favorite classic inspirations. Also, I'm not trying to create the perfect generic universal role-playing game system. I'm not trying to create GURPS 5th edition. I'm trying to create a game that will specifically work for the kind of dungeon game that I want to run and the kind of DMing that I like to do. Yeah, exactly, Darth, right? And then not so much for the group. I'm doing it for the genre, and I'm doing it for me. Like, I know when I'm GMing what are frictional points for me and where I get really, really frustrated. Like, I get frustrated when I GM Pathfinder 2nd edition. I feel powerless. I feel hopeless. I feel disempowered when I GM as a Pathfinder 2 GM. Because the game does not give me the kind of tools that I need in order to do what I want to do. The only tool the game gives me is to cheat, to fudge. I don't do that. So, and I don't like that. And I don't like the basic concept of it. So that makes me feel very disempowered. And so I like games that give me certain, but I also don't like games that is just like, make it up and the points don't matter, because that also doesn't appeal to me. So yeah, it's all about finding something that works really well for me. All right, everybody. That is going to do it. We may be back Tuesday. Remains to be seen. I have off Monday. My work gave us off Monday, which is really great. Actually, my boss gave us off Monday. I don't know if the rest of my company gets off, but my team has off Monday. So there might be a Sunday super secret system stream in our future. So keep an eye out for that. We'll see how I'm feeling. I get bored. When I don't get a chance to talk to you all, I get bored. So hopefully I will see you on our next stream, or even better, I'll see you over in our Discord as you join the Patreon if you've not done so already. Once again, I want to say that, Canada Day is Saturday, so a lot of us have Monday off. Yes, even better, Brutus. Big shout out and love to you as well, Hassel. Thank you all again for spending your evening with me, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Get out there and enjoy some games, and if you're doing any sort of celebration this weekend, remember to stay safe out there and be responsible. I wasn't really talking about drinking. I was talking about fireworks. Around here, like every year, like at least like 6 people get their hands blown off. Fireworks are not a joke. They're not a toy, kids. Live from the shop Monday. What were we talking about? Yeah, both work. That's fair enough. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody. Peace.